In the early days of the Third Reich, the state carefully curated an image of absolute, uncompromising purity. Adolf Hitler was presented to the public as a flawless teetotaler and a strict vegetarian, a man whose physical body belonged entirely to the German people. This strict, clean living aesthetic was a direct reaction to the culture of the previous decade. During the Weimar Republic, cities like Berlin were renowned for their underground nightlife, with the population consuming massive amounts of civilian cocaine and morphine. When the Nazis took power, they immediately banned these substances. They enacted harsh laws to eradicate drug consumption, framing the policies strictly as a matter of protecting the nation's racial hygiene. Take a look at this official document. It's an index card from the Reich Central Office for Combating Drug Transgressions. The regime categorized citizens using numbers and colors, explicitly grouping drug offenders alongside Jewish citizens to falsely portray addiction as a foreign infection. Those caught in the system were systematically sent to concentration camps or euthanized. The state demanded absolute physical perfection and endless energy from its citizens. But humans get tired. The regime had created a massive gap between its totalitarian demands and the biological limits of a flawed human population. To bridge that gap, a pharmaceutical company called Temmler put its head chemist, Dr. Fritz Hauschild, to work. His assignment was to engineer a chemical solution that could eliminate physical exhaustion and meet the high-pressure demands of the state. He succeeded, as seen in this 1930s advertisement for a new, mass-produced pharmaceutical called pervitin. The label explicitly lists it as a medical treatment for depression and fatigue. The active ingredient in this daily pill was methamphetamine. Here is how it hacks the human brain. The chemical structure of methamphetamine triggers a massive release of two specific neurotransmitters: dopamine, which controls motivation and reward, and noradrenaline, which forces the body into a state of high physical alertness. But it does a second crucial thing. It blocks the brain from reabsorbing those chemicals. With the particles trapped in the synaptic gap, the nervous system is forced into a continuous, artificial state of emergency. The user feels a rush of intense euphoria, while the brain completely suppresses the urge to sleep or eat. This was a calculated industrial override switch. It was designed to completely bypass natural human exhaustion, so the population could match the frantic, aggressive pace of the new Reich. Because it was classified as medicine, pervitin easily bypassed the regime's strict anti-drug laws. Temmler marketed the pills heavily, using mass advertising campaigns similar to Coca-Cola, and the stimulant quickly became the Volksdroge, the people's drug. The civilian population relied on it to survive the new performance-obsessed society. Secretaries swallowed pills to type faster, train drivers used them to stay awake on long overnight routes, and factory workers took them to artificially boost their output on the assembly line. Look at this promotional photograph of a smiling woman holding Hildebrand chocolates. Each candy was spiked with 14 milligrams of methamphetamine, nearly 5 times a standard pervitin pill. It was sold to housewives to make daily chores easier. While the public was getting high to meet the demands of the state, Adolf Hitler was struggling to maintain his own flawless image. He suffered from severe digestive cramps and harbored intense paranoia about appearing physically weak to the German people. He found his solution in Dr. Theodor Morell, a celebrity physician who gained the dictator's absolute trust. Morell treated Hitler's ailments by injecting him directly in the veins, daily, with powerful cocktails of glucose and vitamins. The regime systematically murdered civilian addicts under the guise of racial purity, while the Führer himself relied entirely on hidden chemical cocktails just to project the illusion of godlike energy. As the country prepared for war, military doctors watched the civilian population consume millions of these pills. They quickly realized pervitin could solve their greatest logistical hurdle, the fact that soldiers need sleep. Dr. Otto Ranke, a defense physiologist, recognized the drug's military potential. He argued that widespread methamphetamine use could override natural human limits, turning exhaustible men into tireless, animated engines for combat. The Wehrmacht officially adopted the drug as policy. To fuel their rapid military campaigns across Europe, the army ordered the mass production of tens of millions of methamphetamine culls. We know exactly what this policy did to the men on the ground. We can see it in the personal letters of a young German soldier and future Nobel laureate, Heinrich Böll. Writing home from the front, Bull casually and repeatedly begged his parents to mail him envelopes of pervitin. He needed the stimulant simply to endure grueling night watches and the extreme physical exhaustion of his deployment. When the German army invaded its neighbors, executing the infamous Blitzkrieg, the extreme speed and ruthlessness of their advance shocked the world. That momentum was driven by military strategy, but the physical endurance required to execute it was fueled directly by methamphetamine. But human biology cannot be hacked indefinitely. Once the drug wore off, the soldiers suffered a severe depletion of neurons. The blowback resulted in deep depression, widespread cognitive failure, and total physical collapse. The soldiers had been pushed past their natural physiological breaking points. They were left drained, chemically burned out by the impossible demands of their own government. The physical deterioration of these troops mirrored the macro collapse of the Nazi war machine. The artificial chemical energy that propelled their early victories eventually gave way to exhaustion across the entire state. Fascism demands a level of flawless performance and endless expansion that is entirely incompatible with human biology. To maintain the fragile illusion of a master race, the regime ultimately had to poison itself from the inside out. The Nazi state aggressively marketed an image of pristine health and absolute physical purity. They promoted clean living, criminalized intoxication, and weaponized a strict anti-drug policy through constant propaganda. To enforce this, the state built registries to track down and categorize drug addicts. They used centralized index cards, assigning specific numbers to cocaine or morphine users, and color-coded tags to single out minorities, a bureaucratic system designed to purge anyone deemed impure from the national body. But while the regime was publicly hunting down addicts, a very different reality was brewing on the industrial outskirts of Berlin. Inside the expansive brick and steel complex of the Temmler factory, the state was quietly funding a massive chemical operation. In these exact laboratories, a team led by Dr. Fritz Hauschild was tasked with synthesizing a high-grade, performance-enhancing stimulant to artificially force the German workforce into higher levels of productivity. The result was methamphetamine. Branded and legally marketed as pervitin, it was an early, highly potent form of crystal meth. Sold over the counter in pharmacies, the informational leaflet recommended these pills for treating depression, apathy, and general fatigue. The very government threatening its citizens with imprisonment for drug use was simultaneously distributing millions of doses of a highly addictive stimulant to keep its population awake and compliant. When the war broke out in 1939, pervitin transitioned from a civilian pick-me-up to a heavily regulated military asset. The German army placed a single order for 35 million tablets to supply the front lines. As the Wehrmacht moved into Poland and France, medical officers systematically distributed the drug to panzer tank drivers and infantrymen. The goal was biological override, chemically eliminating the human need for sleep so the advance could continue day and night. This internal medical report from the 8th Panzer Division clearly documents the results. The division's medical officer notes that giving the pills to severely taxed troops had an excellent effect on depressed moods and kept drivers completely awake. But down here at the bottom of the same document, the doctor also notes that after taking just 2 tablets, soldiers began experiencing severe side effects, specifically heart palpitations. Rather than pulling the drug in response to these medical warnings, High Command doubled down. In this 1941 decree from the Chemical Ministry, pervitin is officially classified as kriegsentscheidend, literally crucial to the war outcome. The consequence of demanding endless wakefulness was the inevitable chemical crash. Once the methamphetamine wore off, soldiers were left in states of near comatose exhaustion, passing out inside their vehicles completely depleted. The legendary speed of the German Blitzkrieg relied heavily on a state-mandated biochemical hack, one that rapidly degraded the central nervous systems of the soldiers forced to execute it. While the front lines were crashing from widespread amphetamine use, a different pharmacological crisis was unfolding at the absolute top of the command chain. This is Dr. Theodor Morell. He served as Adolf Hitler's personal physician, and over the course of the war, he became the architect of the dictator's daily, secret drug regimen. Morell kept meticulous records for a subject he called Patient A. These files show that what began in 1941 as routine vitamin injections rapidly escalated. As the military situation deteriorated, Hitler developed a massive poly-drug addiction. This timeline charts the sheer volume of intravenous applications Hitler received throughout the conflict. Notice how the dosage spikes aggressively in late 1944. By this point, Morell was regularly injecting him with Eucadol, a potent synthetic opioid similar to oxycodone, as well as highly concentrated doses of pure cocaine. Look at the overlay of Germany's major strategic blunders against these peak dosage periods. The heavy use of synthetic opioids and cocaine created a feedback loop of manic energy and artificial euphoria, insulating Hitler from the catastrophic reality of the failing Eastern Front. The absolute dictator of a regime built on the total eradication of physical weakness was secretly its most dependent addict, relying entirely on heavy narcotics to manufacture a feeling of invincibility that the real world had long stopped providing. By the winter of 1944, Germany was losing a multi-front war, and the entire military apparatus was suffering from systemic chemical toxicity. On the ground, the methamphetamine that had once fueled aggressive invasions was now handed out to starving, freezing soldiers, simply to help them endure the agonizing marches of the retreat. Below ground, Hitler was suffering from acute withdrawal and physical breakdown. The heavy drug use left him with severe tremors, chronic insomnia, and a total collapse of his biochemical balance. Confined to a claustrophobic, windowless bunker, he remained hunched over map tables, directing non-existent armies and making final tactical decisions in a state of deep drug-induced paranoia. The shattered interior of his own military headquarters perfectly mirrored the internal decay of the regime, completely hollowed out by endless conflict and artificial stimulation. The Third Reich relied on a massive, unsustainable chemical high to project an illusion of superiority, and like any severe addiction, it inevitably ended in paranoia, physical decay, and total collapse.